what we're going to do is we're going to have everybody kind of interact with us so that we get a sense for where everybody's at and maybe give you a chance to ask questions. So for this part of it, it's going to take a little time, but 3 questions to ask you. But the way you're going to answer questions is using either your phone or your screen. So if you would, everybody kind of take out your cell phone or maybe open up another browser. And what you want to do is open up a browser on your phone and go to menti.com, menti.com, just like it says on the screen. And then when you do that, it'll ask you a question after you enter the code. So menti.com. And then enter the code 640047. 640047. And just so that we know who's on the line and who was able to get in, it's going to ask you a question, and that's what is your name? And so we can see a lot of people already on. I see Nancy and Sheila and Nick and Patrick and Mylyn and Cassie, Richard, Tiffany, Heather, Tracy, Pam. So we're just going to wait for everybody else to join. There's Amanda, Tracy, Heather. So good. So again, if you haven't already done so, menti.com, menti.com, enter the code 640047. And I can't look at my screen and this at the same time, so I'm going to leave it up to maybe Heather to tell me if anybody's missing. There's Patrick.
Yeah. Hey guys, I've got 16 of you on the screen, but 21 of you as participants. So if you're having issues or can't log on, please kind of roll call and let us know or send me a chat.
Adam is awesome. Is on. Kyle. I think we're looking for maybe Ingrid and who else is missing? Everybody else is there. Okay.
Oh, I'm here on the call. This is Ingrid.
Okay. If you can.
I know Karen's on the call, but she was having technical difficulties earlier. I think she was finally able to get into Zoom. I don't know if she's on Menti yet.
Okay. Anybody missing, we can just have them join at any time, menti.com, and use code 640047. So I'm just going to move forward because it looks like the majority of us are online.
Yeah.
All right, so it's going to ask you again for your name. So enter a name that you'll remember so we know who you are. That first question was just to see who was able to get in. So remember your name, and after you enter your name, it'll show you like a little icon, a little avatar. So as soon as you do that, otherwise it'll give you a name, just as long as you remember what your avatar looks like. We're going to get started with the quiz. So you're trying to get the correct answer in the quickest time possible. The question is, what is the schedule for being on call? And you can use your phone to respond. What is the schedule for being on call? Is it 1 day per week, 1 week per quarter, 1 month per year, or 1 year per decade, which is like UC time? So what is the schedule for being on call? And the correct answer is 1 week per quarter. So 1 week per quarter is a schedule that EH&S salaried exempt staff are going to be serving on this after hours on call team. And to see who got that quickest, I don't know who Fleppy is, but we see Nick got it correct the fastest, followed by somebody named Fluppy, and then Pam, then Tiffany, then Tran, Patrick, CJ. I'm not sure who CJ is, but Thinky, all the way to a ninja. And so you have the ability to be on top if you answer the next question quickest and fastest. So the next question is related to procedures. When an incident happens after hours, we need to ensure an assessment is done. Who do you contact for assessment of the response needed? Do you contact an EH&S SME? Do you contact the fire marshal, the EH&S manager, emergency management, or PD? As a hint, there are two, I think at least 1 or 2 correct answers. And you got it. You actually contact either or EH&S SME or an EH&S manager. So the subject matter expert would be depending on what the issue is, whether it's bio, rad, or chemicals, you would contact that appropriate person. And so let's see who got correct the quickest. And it looks like Nick, followed by Tran, who moved up, and Patrick, and Pam moved down slower, probably because it was a quick question. So, okay, we have, I think, 1 or 2 more questions, and this is related to procedures. So imagine there's a spill, biochem or rad. The area can't be secured for cleanup the next day. Who do you contact to resolve it? So if you can't wait for the spill to be cleaned up the next day, who do we contact? And the answer is not JC, actually, or Richard. The correct answer is you contact both. A contractor who can do the cleanup, such as Clean Harbors, and then you contact Sheila. Sheila has to begin other processes if we get an after-hours spill, so we definitely want to let her know. So your first goal is not to contact JC or Richard, but contact a contractor. So again, we are trying to make sure that we spend as least amount of time of people on campus as possible. If it can be held off and addressed the next business day, we'll try to have the person secure the area. And if it cannot be secured, then we contact the contractor like Clean Harbors to clean up, and then we let Sheila know. Okay, so who got this answer correct? Looks like Nick is still on top, followed by Flippy. Nick won. Wow, so that was the last of the questions. Congratulations.
I feel like all the money I have spent on the extra download and upload speeds of my home internet is finally paid off.
That might just be it. You have quicker internet. Congratulations, Nick. All right.
Thank you.
So we have two smaller questions. It's just an evaluations question. So everybody, if you could rate what is your overall reaction to this course, which is just like after today's training, how are you feeling? So go ahead and answer. What is your overall reaction after hearing about the flow chart and the response team, who's on the response team, that we're doing an assessment and all this stuff, and that we're even just using this Menti to interact? What is your overall reaction to this training? It looks like people are feeling very good about it. Awesome. As long as we're not getting too poor, that's good. Okay, so more importantly, this is the last question, I think. We wanted to know, what questions do you have about what we talked about today? You can use your phone to enter a question anonymously, but we went over kind of a lot in a short amount of time. What questions do you guys have about what we talked about today? So does anybody have any questions that they can submit on their phone so we can all take a look and figure out how to answer it? All right, we have one question. So keep asking your questions as we go along. Do we have an idea of how often we get these calls now and how often we might need after hours response? So how often might we need for after hours response? It's a good question that JC can probably answer, or maybe Richard. But how often do we get these calls now? Does anybody know? Like maybe Nancy, do you know how often we get these calls after hours?
Rarely.
Rarely. Okay.
So we have gotten calls for water intrusion, as Adam knows. I think there was
Yeah,
flood.
those wouldn't come through me. They would probably come through facilities, and sometimes facilities neglects to inform me. So I'm completely taken out of the loop on some of these.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So rarely, but hopefully they'll be contacting through the main line, and Nancy is aware. But they include not just spills, they include IEQ reports and whatnot. Really good question. When will the rotation schedule be established? And which is similar to the next question, is there a timeline of when this will begin? So I don't think we really talked about when it will actually begin, but it seems like this coronavirus thing taking us all out of the office sort of forces us to be in this mode of after hours response anyway. So Sheila, did you want to answer that question? When will the rotation schedule be established, or when will it begin actually?
So first off, let me just say kudos to all of you who've worked on this. This is incredible. Thank you so much for dedicating some time to this very important program. For those of you who don't know, the team has worked tirelessly. This is one of my first requests, and we have finally come to a point where we're ready to share this. So thank you for all your hard work on this. This is very good. The rotation schedule should be established where the last thing is just fine-tuning and having HR review all the expectations that we've put forth. And as soon as I get a thumbs up from them, then we can go ahead and move forward with it. So it's just in that last phase of review.
Thank you, Sheila. And I was saying that the Incident Response Team Planning Committee will be meeting and we'll be rolling this out, the rotation schedule of who goes first, who's next, and whatnot. Sorry about that. It sounds weird when you're talking to yourself. Are there preferred vendors for contractors? So I'm going to ask JC, maybe even Nancy, to answer that question. Well, who are the preferred vendors for contractors?
Yes, so in the response guidebook, there is a support contacts list, and within that support contacts list, there's listed 2 vendors there. Stericycle and Clean Harbors are 2 vendors for emergency response. We have contracts with them, and those 2 numbers are active. And you can give them, if you have any troubles, if you actually call them and it escalates to the point where you need to clean up from them and you have issues, feel free to contact me. I can facilitate that, but they already know that we're going to have like set up a response, and they're already ready for any numbers are there. And then the sewer and storm drain services, I have this website, so that's going to be, and then you have your other phone numbers here. Yeah.
Thanks, JC. Thank you for that. So Stericycle and Clean Harbors, and we'll be going over the guidebook and that contact list next month. There's a question that follows up that. Are there standing POs for the contractor's response so that, let's say we're off and something happens tonight and Tracy gets a call and she calls Clean Harbors. Is there a standing PO number or whatnot? Have we figured that out that we can do that?
We do have a standing PO with Stericycle, and I can share that information. I'll write that down to share. For the Clean Harbors, there is no PO accessed for an emergency response. The communication we have with them is they would come out and do the work and then provide us with an invoice. Or actually, they provide us with a quote and then an invoice. Basically, all we would have to do is sign that quote for the response. We have basically a UC wide system contract with both vendors. So we've gone through this with procurement, so there is no issues for standing POs. I will provide the Stericycle one. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, JC. So we'll look forward to getting that information through the email. And then these 2 questions are sort of together. What is our emergency cell number? And if you're not issued one, are you included in the rotation? Is there equipment that's designated and shared? So people are included in the rotation based on their status as exempt and salaried staff. So if you are non-exempt or if you are paid on an hourly basis and you do your timesheet weekly, then you're not part of the rotation. But if you are paid monthly and you get and you're just a salaried staff member, you're part of the rotation. The exceptions, I believe, are that risk management and workers' comp are not included in the rotation, and neither is the training COE, although Jeanette is, but not the rest of the training COE. Okay, so now the question is, what about the cell phone number? I don't think we've coordinated with Nancy, but I believe, and everybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we were trying to get one cell phone number to use, and that would be rotated along with the bag and whatnot. Is that correct, Amanda and JC and Heather and Tracy and Tiffany, who we've been meeting with? Is that, am I making that up?
Correct.
That's correct. Okay.
That's the plan.
All right. So we're sharing one cell phone number, and we will give that number to PD and steam plant and whoever needs to call us on.
And that cell phone number will be given to the person who is serving the on-call rotation, along with the other materials and references and supplies that will be passed from one person to the next at with the rotation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Amanda. Okay, and then last question. Are there at least 2 people on rotation at a time so that the responder is not working alone? Really good question, actually point of a lot of discussion. I don't believe we were planning to have 2 people on rotation at a given time. It was discussed, and we're just so short, and it's almost virtually impossible to have 2 people on at every given time. Although the managers essentially did speak about, well, you wouldn't necessarily be alone. There would be people, like let's say it happened in the lab. the lab person would be there, police would be on site, and you're not, I mean, there's no expectation to come all the way in. I don't know. I would like to have Tiffany and Amanda, JC, Tracy, Adam to talk to this, but I don't believe we were planning to have 2 people on at every given time. Would you guys like to talk about that?
Sure.
That's correct.
So we don't anticipate 2 people being on call. Like you said, the staffing, we're already going to be doing it once a quarter. But if we do have to come in to the campus for assessment, it will be just that, assessment. And we will need to coordinate with whoever called in the incident that will remain on site. And therefore, they'll be the ones, working besides us, right next to us, and assessing the situation. If it is deemed that we can clean up the 2-gallon spill of a material that we know, then that person can clean on their own as long as there's others around them. Once the situation escalated to, it's a 5-gallon container, a 10-gallon container, then you're out of your scope, and therefore you need to call out. All of these things will be addressed in more detail when we go into the trainings and we go into the specific scenarios. But there is no obligation for one person to be alone in any kind of situation. So like you mentioned at the very beginning of that question, whoever calls that in is going to be on site, and we'll need to communicate with them to remain on site until you get there, and then once you get there, to remain on site to work with you. So there shouldn't be a worry about working alone, because that should never happen.
Thank you, JC. Anybody else want to speak to this, Tiffany or Amanda?
I think if the person who is serving the on-call rotation had to come to campus for any reason, like JC said, there's always going to be those persons that are on campus that called in the call. But then if you needed to call another EH&S person, a subject matter expert, and you felt that it was necessary for them to be on site to make the assessment, then they would respond and come on site. And so then they would be there if it was necessary, if it was really necessary for them to make observations, maybe use instruments, whatever, they needed to do to make that assessment.
Okay, another question came in. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, JC. Another question came in. Do we have a vendor for radiation spills? JC, do you know if Clean Harbors can do rad spills or Stericycle?
I don't think Stericycle can. For rad spills, there's not a lot of rad there's not a lot of rad being used right now on campus, but I'm pretty sure Clean Harbors can handle basically any kind of spill.
Right, it's unlikely for the spill to be of such high quantity.
Right, that would be a vendor. I know the radiation group has come up with techniques and strategies and SOPs for the labs themselves to clean up radiation spills. But yeah, I don't see a large volume requiring the vendor to come out unless it's like a full-on decon of a room. Then we would have to escalate that.
Okay, very good. And also on that note, the idea is that if it's especially rad and the quantities are so low on campus, if it's a spill, it may be considered minor enough to hold off till the next day. And so we want to try to encourage everybody to try to get the area secured so that it can wait till the next day. Of course, that would need consultation with Karen, the SME, so that's part of the procedure. Contact an EH&S SME. All right, and that seems to be like all the questions we got, unless anybody wanted to open up their mic and ask any more questions. It seems like we went over a lot, and we had a chance to talk about things that seemed a little confusing through these questions. That was good.